announcers. It's time to start. Enjoy the show.
Welcome aboard, everyone, to Betting Weekly Live. It is Wednesday, the 26th of March, with Steve Wyss, and delighted to be joined by Doug Kezirian again. The last time you were on Betting Weekly Live, Doug, you went 5-0 on your match picks, so high expectations this time around. I hope you've been doing well.
I have been doing well this week, so I actually decided not to shave. Usually I'm clean shaven, but, you know, we're all gamblers at our core, at our inner core, and who are we to disrupt any sort of juju, if you will. So I'm not going to, I'm almost going to guarantee you I'm not going to go undefeated like last time, Steve. But, some would say let's not talk about a hot streak or anything like that. But I'm not like that, although I didn't shave for that reason. So who knows? Betting
superstitions. We actually were talking about that a few months ago. Different things. I don't like to wear the color red. To me, it signals like loss and losers and being in the negative. That always sort of gets me. My wife bought a red car, which kind of annoyed me. Welcoming everyone. Byron Muriel, good to see you. Great pick yesterday in that Norwegian game, Byron, on the Rice and shot. Argentina is something else. They're going to go win back-to-back World Cups, he reckons. Paul Laguna, good to see you. Rick Haley, Ming Chung, Villa fan as well. Congratulations, you, Doug, on the tipping last time out. Duncan Evans and Leslie Mack as well. Dave Clark, welcome in. How are you doing, everyone? Put down your best bets today. The end of the international soccer window it's over now, pretty much, as we look ahead to the weekend on the soccer, the tennis as well. Some notable winners and losers yesterday. Iran live on the draw double chance at plus 108 against Uzbekistan. $15,000 on that. That was a good winner. A really interesting $10,000 winner in Bolivia against Uruguay. Over 18.5 total corners live at plus 275, and there were 19 corners in the game. That's a great winner for someone. Bolivia had 16 corners on their own. I think the match corners line would have probably started off about 8.5, so it went crazy with corners. Great in running bet there. And a $12,000 winner on the Tiger Golf League, Atlanta Drive GC. They won the event with this $12,000 bet yesterday. Minus 120 on the money line was a great winner for someone there. So, very, very good stuff. We've got house specials to mention. We've got some notable live streams to mention. And Doug's on the show. We're going to go through the entire Sweet 16 card of March Madness. We've got some NBA stuff as well. And, how has March Madness been treating you, Doug? You just said you're in great form. Right into the real meat of the tournament now, as I like to say.
So last weekend was tough for me in college hoops. The big storyline right now in March Madness is that there hasn't really been any madness, right? It's been chalk, but more so the power conferences. For the first time ever, only 4 conferences are comprising the Sweet 16, and then you have a record number as well with 7 schools from the SEC. Now, there's been some conference realignment, so a couple of these conferences are bigger than they've ever been. But the overall gist is accurate, is that we don't have what we have called over the years Cinderella, the dream run by some of these double-digit seeds or these long shots. And honestly, in recent years, we've seen some even reach the Final Four. But the NIL, which has changed the landscape of college basketball, that's being blamed because it's a bidding war, and it's the transfer portal plus the bidding war, because if a team is good, a mid-major or a smaller conference team, their players get poached, and that's the key. So a lot of these teams that had a chance to be Cinderella or a up-and-comer, or at least have the potential to pull off upsets, their best players have been poached. Even a school like Yale, their big man, who wasn't their best player by any means, but a 7-footer, he's now on Michigan in the Sweet 16. So just 1 year later, and that's the key. You don't have to sit out anytime. So, but in terms of my performance, it was not my best effort last weekend. A couple things go your way, a couple things go against you, stuff like that. But that's betting. The NBA has been better. I know we're going to talk about that later. But we turned the page in what should be a really exciting Sweet 16, because what happens is when there's no Cinderella, you have a lot of big programs and marquee names, and then you have tight spreads. So we have a lot of what's expected to be really good games from a sports fan's perspective. So, maybe that makes it a little easier in the handicapping. And just to sort of not pick the winner, but, knowing the matchup of two good teams and not necessarily a team that's outperforming the market from, the previous months and all of a sudden has gotten hot in March.
Yeah, and as Nish said there, never made it to the ball, Cinderella. She can't make it there every single year. It struck me when I saw the spreads for the Sweet 16 here, not a single point spread in double digits on the main line. So, I mean, I found that quite surprising. But as you said, there's a lot of really good teams that have made it through there. And you're right, betting is up and down. It's highs and there's lows. I mean, just yesterday for me, I crushed it in the Norway-Israel game, and I was brought straight down to earth. Brazil against Argentina. I was badly stung in that game. Really loved the unders, and it ended 4-1. Shout out to Argentina, as a few guys mentioned at the top of the show, and how bad were Brazil. But we're not talking soccer today. We're talking basketball. I've got a question, actually, before we start these the Sweet 16 games. There's a house special on Bet Rivers, all 4 number 1 seeds to reach the final 4, plus 553 Bet Rivers are offering on this. Could that be a potential bet, do you think, Doug? Is that generous?
Yeah, I believe it was 12-1 range beginning of the tournament. And at this point, you're really looking at, a bunch of money. It's a money line parlay, right? It's an 8-leg money line parlay. This, obviously, the round, all 4 1 seeds this round, and then all 4 projected 1 seeds. And at the beginning of the tournament, there is a way that it could break your way or against you. And what do I mean by that? So what happens at the beginning of the tournament, you just don't know how the bracket's going to unfold. So sometimes there's carnage, hence the term March Madness, where a lot of upsets have occurred. So a favorite, a 1 seed, let's call it in this case, will face a bunch of teams with double-digit seeds, like you were alluding to, Steve. But sometimes it doesn't happen, like this year. So the path ahead is relatively, scripted, if you will. And that's why we're only getting 5-1 with 2 more rounds to go. So it's an 8-leg money line parlay. We know the money lines of the first 4, right? We know the money lines right now of those games. And then, will they play favorites? Will they, in the other side of the bracket, will the favorites advance? I will say, I mean, look, 5-1 is always fun, but given the in-game wagering, and Houston is right now the only not odds-on favorite. So right now, the 3-1 seeds, Duke, Auburn, and the other one's escaping me, are all, so they're all minus money to win their region, right? So it's an 8-leg money line parlay, or it's a 4-leg regional odds. And then Houston could have a really tough game in the Midwest against Tennessee if they both advance, but they may catch a break. Kentucky could upset Tennessee like they did during the regular season and go from there. So it doesn't jump out at me, but it does give you a little action on both days. And then obviously on kind of in a way, all 8 games on the Sweet 16.
Yeah, I think it's an interesting response to that, Doug. Like you say, plus 553, that will interest some people. But I totally get it for those who want to play it game by game. Could be a more safer option. Just a quick answer there. Sir Isaac Newton, is it true that all soccer contracts in Europe are guaranteed? That would depend on the league, Sir Isaac. If you're talking Premier League, then yes. You get many a player who just sit rot in the reserves and get paid week in, week out. It has happened. But if you're semi-pro level or in some other leagues, there'll be potential clauses and stuff. But certainly in the top leagues, that'd be the case. Okay, let's get down to these games then. And first one, BYU and Alabama. We've got a -5 favorite here with Alabama, 175.5 points line, which seems pretty high to me. It's expected to be a shootout then, Doug.
Yeah, and it opened around 171, and it got bet up right away. And it makes sense. Both these teams want to get up and down, and their defense leaves a lot to be desired. And just for those unfamiliar with BYU, I don't know if you remember, I believe a month ago or so, I was on this show, and it may have been with Nigel. I can't remember if it was you or Nigel, but I gave out BYU, maybe even triple digits or 80-1. I just thought their upside is there. What happened is they lost their coach who went to Kentucky, and they brought in an assistant from the NBA. And you see a lot of NBA pedigree or traits in some of their action. So they have a very fluid offense and then out of timeouts, it's some high level stuff. And I just think their offense is really, really impressive. And this Alabama defense, I've just never been a big believer in them. I wouldn't be shocked if they got to the championship game or something, but I just don't think Alabama. I think that defense is a serious issue, and the offense is really impressive. So Alabama's defense ranks 29th at Ken Palm in terms of defensive efficiency. It's not going to get it done when you get to these kind of games. They may escape, they may cover. I don't think the Crimson Tide win at all. And we saw that down the stretch, losing at home to Auburn and some other things. What Alabama does is they're very analytically driven. So they want 3-pointers or shots around the rim. And look, it got to the Final Four. Their coach knows what he's doing in recent years. Mark Sears, their point guard, is a floor general for sure. But think about it this way. Alabama wants to just be, take is the math. They want the math on their side. But we've all played blackjack where we have an 11 against a 6 or against a 5, and we double down and somehow we lose the hand. So eventually, even when the math is on your side, the combined probability of all those outcomes makes it harder. We just talked about the 4-1 seeds, like you said, they're favorites, and then the probably still plus 553, right, to get to the Final Four. So I just think at some point Alabama may go cold a little bit shooting. Their defense is never going to bail them out, and they'll get by. So if I had to take something in this game, I would take the underdog. You mentioned the total. I do think it's going to be a high-scoring game, but I would grab the 5.5 points, but it's not like a true play for me.
Yeah, Paul Laguna says he doesn't think Alabama is going to cover here either. So that might be an idea to look at the dog in this game. Mate SK, good to see you in the chat. Welcome in. Dave Clark says the tourney's been rough for me. He won the first 2 days and lost a lot Saturday and Sunday. It sounds like the weekend was rough, potentially. Let's go down to Arizona against Duke. Duke, the favorites to win this whole thing, and minus 9.5. This is the biggest spread, actually, of the entire card. 154 points line. Duke, obviously, there's been quite a lot of money for them in the futures market. Doug, they're expected to win this game. 9.5 points. Are they going to cover that, do you think?
That's a tough one. So I think Arizona's a little bit of a wild card, as much as you can be with sort of a blue blood and an old school sort of power. I don't trust them. They have a player in Caleb Love who's a transfer from North Carolina. He's just so incredibly inconsistent, whereas Duke has been pretty rock solid. Now, UConn had him on the ropes, or had Florida on the ropes, but Duke played Baylor, and Baylor's not good. Like, I laid it with Duke last week, and so Duke's the favorite in like UConn last year. So that's the parallel I was making. UConn covered every game last year in the tournament and the previous year every game. So they won the title back-to-back years covering all 12 games. So there has been dominant teams we've seen just flex their muscles. And in fact, Duke is 10-2 against the spread over the last 12 games. So even down the stretch in conference play, conference tournament, they were covering big numbers too. That's the other thing. They're a covering machine. They played in November, these two teams. The Blue Devils won by 14 in Tucson at Arizona, but that was November. So you kind of throw it out. But this Baylor team's not very good that Duke just beat. Duke was 12 of 22 from 3. Tyrese Proctor was 7 of 8. If the Blue Devils don't shoot like that, then the 9.5 might come into play. I just don't trust Arizona enough to get in front of this Blue Devils covering wagon. So just because it's the tournament, I don't think Arizona can win. So, and I don't think they can keep it that close. So I'm looking at, can they lose by 6 or 7 or 8 or 9, right? Like, I don't think it's going to be a 4-point game. Obviously, there's a chance, but that's my thought process. I don't think they're live on the money line. I think Duke, and we see what producer Troy chiming in, 11 of their last 13 wins have become by double digits. So they are trucking teams, and Cooper Flagg was out in the ACC tournament, and they had that scare against Carolina, but Cooper Flagg's best player in the country. So, kind of throw that game out. but they were up 20 in that game. So it shows there's a supporting cast as well. I think there's better things to do with your money than back Arizona. They're just too inconsistent for my liking. And they've had some stinkers. They played Houston. Now, Houston's a very good defensive team, but they were like 1 of 20 or something like that from 3 in that game during the regular season. The Wildcats are certainly capable of laying a giant egg. And that, therefore, like I said, there's just better things to do with your money than get in front of this Duke train with an inconsistent squad like Arizona.
93% of the money is on Duke. 92% of the tickets are on Duke. That's the most of anyone in any of these Sweet 16 games. That's no surprise. They've been backed off the boards with the futures market as well. We've got some comments about this game. Paul Laguna says Arizona didn't look that great last time out. He thinks that they could get destroyed, and then the -9 is a cover. Byron says that Zona have seen Duke already. That maybe is an advantage for Arizona here. Sweet 16 games always closer. Yeah, I think, this is good advice, Doug. Sometimes you don't have to put your money on these matchups where it's a tough one to decide. But if you are strong on something like Paul is, you've got to go with it. They sound like if they're in the mood, Duke. I mean, I like sports teams like this who do rack up the score. Sometimes they can be classed as flat track bullies, but I quite like teams that go all out, really. But interesting on your thoughts on that one. We go to Maryland and Florida now. -6 on Florida. I know we talked the last time we were on. You thought they were the best team in this, Florida. I mean, I don't know if you still hold of that opinion. Have you, from what you've seen of them, do you think here that they're going to win the game, cover the spread? 157 points total looks sort of mid-range-ish.
Yeah, I have Duke beating Florida in the championship game, if I remember correctly, that my bracket. But, obviously things are allowed to change in your opinion. So I like Florida here. There's a couple schools of thought with that scare against UConn, and it was more than a scare. The Huskies were favored on the live line at some point late in the second half. Is every team that eventually wins it usually has a scare where they almost lost, and that could have been their scare. And obviously facing an elite coach with Hurley and a good game plan and everything. But Florida, they're not typically a team that plays not to lose and plays tight and down to their opponent. So that was a legit scare. I just don't know if it carries over. I think 6 feels pretty cheap, which is silly because it's 6.5. I was like, But so Maryland has a really good starting 5. We saw the buzzer beater. They don't have a lot of depth, but in the tournament, the timeouts and stoppages are a little longer. So I think they'll be okay from a stamina standpoint. I like Florida here at 6. If I go down with the Gators, so be it. I just don't like. I think Danny Hurley is a better coach than Golden for Florida, and I think he showed that. And I think that's what happens in the tournament the most is the quick turnaround from a Thursday, Friday game to Saturday, Sunday. That's less than 48 hours often, and the coaches are really forced. They flex their muscles. I don't think we have a coaching mismatch here, and that's okay. It's not a knock on Maryland. It's just you don't have Danny Hurley, so I just think Florida's got too much firepower. We saw with Clayton Jr. going off. They have the depth. They have the bigs. I'm okay with Maryland going down because they're a nice story. They're a good team. I just don't think they have the chops to hang for 40 minutes. Like, I wouldn't play first half on the Gators, but at 6 at Bet Rivers, I think that's a good line in the market. So I would lay the 6 with Florida.
Yeah, and I know there's been some comments about Florida in the chat in the last few days. Paul Laguna has got them -4 on the lock there. And Byron's on the -4.5. They have been well backed here. 77% of the money, 90% of the tickets, which is quite a lot. There was a comment about someone like them to win, but also the under. What do you think about the under in this game? 157. Is that line about right, Doug?
Yeah, I think that's right about right. Obviously, if you get to 160, you're like, okay, team in the 80s and 70s. So the 56.5 feels right? So you're looking at an 82-75 game, and that would go over by a hook, and that would be on the number, right? So that'd be, you're looking at 181.5, 175, or 81.5 and 75. So I think the Florida defense probably doesn't get enough credit It's 10th defensive rating in Ken Palm. The Maryland team's been nice. And also, when they're young, one of their, the guy who made the game-winning basket is a freshman. At the end of the year, these guys aren't freshmen anymore, right? Like, we talk about that in college football when you have 5 weeks off in the bowl game. Like, there's so many reps and so many regular season games. And these guys come into college having played AAU ball. And, like, they're not freshmen, right? You heard about it in the timeout before their game-winning shot. The coach asked him who wants the ball, and Queen said, "Yeah, I do. Give me the damn ball," right? So these guys. So yes, he's young and some stuff like that. With that being said, the Gators do have experience. They're battle tested, and we talked about that coming into the tournament with the SEC having 14 teams in the Big Dance and now 7 in the Sweet 16. I think Florida ultimately has too many stretches where they go on runs, and let's face it, Maryland was down the entire game to Colorado State. Now they're the underdog role here, and I think they're not going to play as tight, but that is in the back of my mind. As much as Florida was on the ropes against UConn Sunday morning, Maryland was too. So it's not exactly a Terps team that's in great form myself, but again, much different role being the underdog and taking on, being David going after Goliath.
Paul Gunn is on about Florida getting first to 10 here. Do you think they're going to come out quick, shooting threes at the beginning?
Well, look, I think those are fun bets, and sometimes there's good angles. Maybe like Golden State and the Heat last night with the Jimmy Butler return, and there's a good angle. But ultimately, overall, you want to go larger sample size, right? If you flip a coin 6 times, you're less likely to get 50-50 outcome than if you flip it 100 times, right? If you do, the longer the sample size, the more truer the outcome is likely to be. So if I like Florida, I'm going to be inclined to just want to play the full game. With that being said, I do understand that could have been their wake-up call for sure. But the Terps had a wake-up call as well with Colorado State, and they escaped.
Yeah, I think you're right. These quick markets, they can be fun. You can sometimes get an edge. I actually had a bet on a cricket match today on total runs in the first over, which I wouldn't normally do, but I did like the matchup. So, you find the right spot, then it's kind of worth it sometimes. Anyway, we move to Arkansas, Texas Tech here, -5.5 favorite with Texas. At a points line at -148, and the 84% of the over-under money is actually on the over in this game, Doug. So that is what stood out to me with the actual betting trends. In terms of the match itself, you got anything on here that you like?
That surprises me. I would bet under, if anything, on that total. This is interesting because Arkansas has a coach who's usually, on one of the bigger marquee programs, John Calipari, and they're from the SEC, but they're the double-digit seed, and they're the only double-digit seed in this Sweet 16. I just think Arkansas was lucky to win that last game against St. John's. I mean, St. John's had 28 offensive rebounds, but they were 2 of 22 from 3. Arkansas, if you look at the box score, had no business winning that game. Now, St. John's didn't either, and that's why one of them had to win. But I think Texas Tech is better coached with Grant McCasland. I don't think much of John Calipari's coaching, especially in the second half and late in games. Is he an awful coach? Of course not. But I just think the Red Raiders have the edge. There might be a key player coming back for the Hogs. But if I had to play this, I'm on Texas Tech for sure. I think they're the better team. And while a conference could have more teams in, like the SEC, and be battle tested and things like that, that doesn't mean the top of another conference is necessarily worse. I think Texas Tech's legit. They've played some interesting games this year. I do think they have less margin for error than maybe some other 3 seeds, but I think they're going to be ready, and I think they have the coaching edge enough for me to lay the 5.5. But it's just a lean. That's a lot. Like at 4, I'd love it, but obviously 5.5 is much different.
Yeah, and this kind of on the splits here, 80% of the money and 76% of the tickets are on Texas Tech. That's on the money line, but 76% of the money on the spread is on Arkansas. So that would kind of make sense that this, perhaps a win between 0 to 5 is quite likely for the favorite in this game. And when that is the case, you don't have to get involved. You don't have to be heavy. but you do like the direction that Texas Tech are heading. Let's look at the other 4 games. Ole Miss here against Michigan. Really tight spread, -3.5. I think it's the lowest one of the entire slate. 144 points line here. We've got, I mean, we can actually talk money line, can't we? Plus 145 on Ole Miss, Michigan, -177. Would the money line be a direction you might look at here, Doug?
Not necessarily. I think it's priced appropriately. And obviously, in this case, you have a 32-cent straddle, which feels right for a 3.5 point line. I think it's really interesting. So the conversation with Michigan State always begins with Tom Izzo, their legendary coach, who's gone to 8 Final Fours in his career. And he's always flips the switch proverbially in March. I mentioned earlier, the coaching edges are usually really pronounced between Thursday, Friday, and then Saturday, Sunday, the quick turnaround. So, for example, Izzo has been to 15 Sweet 16s. He's 10-5, so solid. And sometimes he's been the favorite and things like that. Sometimes he's the underdog. But when he gets to the Elite 8, he's 8-2. And so he's usually shines, and sometimes he's been the underdog in those. So he really, that's when he, I think, flexes. This Michigan State team, offense at some point is going to do them in. Now, they're ranked 25th in offensive rating, but their defense is 5th. And obviously 25th is nothing to sneeze at, but when you're splitting hairs, you've reached the Sweet 16, you're a favorite. I think these are things that bring it up. They only shoot 31% from 3. They can go cold, and frankly, they're really slow starters, and their depth has been their difference maker in a lot of games. So if I'm going to play this, I would look at the first half for Ole Miss because I love their coach, Chris Beard, and I think he can scheme against them a little bit and sort of keep this game inside the number or close. But I just don't love the Rebels either. I mean, they're 6th seed for a reason. I was hoping this line would be closer to 4.5, 5, and then I would grab the points. But I just need more than 3.5. So I do like the first half maybe under in this game. I think Sparty's offense has a little trouble to get going. So I just think the first half under, and I see 68.5 at Bet Rivers. That's my underplay. I think that's the best way to play this game. For whatever reason, they're slow. They're slow in that game. They're slow starters, Michigan State is. And they're a big second half team for most of the year. Not all the year. It's not guaranteed, but that's how I would play it.
Yeah, those defensive stats do sound impressive. Under 68.5 first half points at -118 with Bet Rivers. On the 3-way halftime betting, by the way, Ole Miss plus 125 for those who are interested in them there. That does include the tie for those who are betting that market. Just some stats on that game. It's a much tighter one in terms of the betting. Just 66% of the money is on Michigan State, as you might expect with a 3.5 spread. There was who put up -3.5. Mate SK, I think it was. He liked. Yeah, Mate SK likes the 3.5 match line there. So yeah, the under first half, that is Doug's play, under 68.5. Let's move to the Tennessee game now. Kentucky against Tennessee, -4 favorite here in Tennessee. And again, we've got a points line right, sort of in those 140s here. Money line -190 for Tennessee, and 84% of that money is on them. Are you a favorite backer here or with the dog, Doug?
It's a tricky game. You know the old sports adage, and it's certainly a cliche. It's hard to beat a team 3 times, which isn't really accurate because if the worst team played the best team, they'd beat them 100 times in a row. But it's hard to beat a good team 3 times. And coincidentally, Kentucky won both regular season meetings against the Vols, including a game in Knoxville. So that's sort of surprising. But the Wildcats have a really good coach in Mark Pope, and I thought the matchup in the previous round favored them against Illinois. I just thought they had better shooters and over 40 minutes. The over-under is interesting. So this one's 145, right? And the 2 regulars, that's right in the middle of the 2 regular season meetings of 151 and 139. So literally right in the middle between those. I think there's a little bit of an under feel for me. Tennessee knows Kentucky's offense by now, right? There's a familiarity to their opponent, right? They're both SEC teams. This is their third meeting. I do like the under if I were to play the total. I don't think the Wildcats can shoot like they did against this Tennessee defense. I'm just a little gun shy. The Vols, you think of their games as being low scoring because of their offense and then their excellent defense, but they can score. They find points. So I do think Tennessee covers here at -4, but I probably am on the under here a little bit. So they're both leans. I just think Kentucky's really well coached, and Rick Barnes always finds a way to wet the bed, so to speak. So I'm not in a rush to bet the Vols. I mean, again, just like we talked about at the top of the show, these lines are pretty tight, and so this is another one that's tough. But at 4, I could I lean there, even though I'm going against the coaches, and I don't want to go against Pope, and I don't necessarily am rushing to bet on Barnes, but this UT defense is something special.
71% of the tickets are on the over, but 83% of the money's on the under. So that's where the money's coming. And Doug does agree with that, the under in that game, Kentucky, Tennessee. Corey says he still thinks Duke is underpriced in the market, as crazy as that sounds. Welcome in, Corey. Good to see you.
So they're plus 200, I guess, is the question.
Yeah, plus
as the future.
Yeah,
I mean, they didn't catch any breaks with the bracket, right? Like they're still a 1 seed, and like we talked about, no Cinderellas and all that, blah blah blah. But man, they look every part as the best team in the country. They really do. And producer Troy chimed in that they've won 13 straight, 11 by double digits. So while the ACC has been a giant letdown with the other teams all being kind of smacked around, it's okay to be top heavy. Frankly, UConn came from the Big East, right? The last 2 years, and that conference didn't get that many in last year. Large reason for that is because of the bid stealers for a year ago. But you could be the best team in the country and not come from the best conference. And Duke is certainly the best team in the country. And some of their supporting cast players, I mentioned it with you earlier, is you're allowed to get better throughout the course of the season. And I think that supporting cast certainly is. And Cooper Flagg's the guy. So the bracket didn't break their way because they still have a 2 seed and a 4 seed in their way. But I do think, I would love to bet Duke against Alabama. I think the defense will really have a problem, give Alabama a tough time. But look, plus 200, it feels like a fair price.
Yeah. Let's move here to Michigan against Auburn, the Wolverines against the Tigers. Tigers favored quite significantly here, -9 on the spread. 153.5 is the points line, -530 on the money line for Auburn here. The Tigers should have plenty of bite, do you think, Doug, or not?
Yeah, I was hoping this line would be a little shorter. I kind of like Auburn to blow them out. And this number's come up from 8. And, here's the thing. Auburn is still the number 1 overall seed. I believe they have 17 quad 1 wins. So they have a lot of wins against elite opponents. And they're battle tested. And we all know Bruce Pearl is going to be pushing the right buttons to motivate his team and play the underdog, us against the world card, even though they're the number 1 overall seed. But people have been looking past them a little bit, whether it's their brackets and whatnot, because the Tigers did not play great down the stretch. They lost a few games, but they lost to quality opponents, a couple of them on the road in conference play, if I remember correctly. And maybe Auburn peaked a little too early, but it's not like this team's been spiraling or anything silly like that. And I wonder if they're just kind of sneaking up on teams. With that being said, Michigan's got a great coach in Dusty May. They have size on the front line. I thought that was a favorable matchup in the previous round against A&M for the Wolverines. And they have some size to throw on Janai Broom, but he's such a versatile player. He can stretch the opposing defense. 9 feels like a little too much, but I'll tell you what, I'm not grabbing the points either with the Wolverines or even messing around on the money line. I think Michigan's run runs out. But I will say they have a knack for playing a lot of close games over the last couple of months. Didn't really happen in the last couple of games, or it did in the first round against San Diego. But I wouldn't be shocked if Michigan sneaks inside the number and Dusty May pushes the right buttons. But this should be a really fun game. But there is a scenario where Auburn's talent just wins out and pulls away.
Yeah, it looks a tough one to call. 76% of the tickets on the spread are on the Wolverines to cover that +9. Let's finish with the final game on the card. Purdue against Houston here, -8 favorites. Houston here, and there is a lot of money. 89% of the money's on them. 90% of the tickets on the money line, -400. Houston a good favorite here, -8 on the spread.
Yeah, of all the favorites, this is the one I like the most. I like Houston to take care of business. I think I've been waiting for Purdue to bet against them in this tournament, and the bracket just hasn't broke their way, or my way, I should say. It broke Purdue's way. I mean, they've beaten High Point, which was a little bit of a too trendy of a pick, and McNeese State, which pulled off an upset over Clemson in the first round because Clemson just laid an egg in the first half. And McNeese State, like their coach had already accepted a job elsewhere. I don't know. They had one foot out the door. They weren't very good, and Purdue just smoked them. I don't think the Boilermakers are very good. What they are is led by a good coach, and they have two studs, including their point guard, who's going to handle the ball a lot. And, for example, they have two guys who were first team All Big Ten, and then no one else on the second team, the honorable mention or anything. But they had the player of the year, Braden Smith, the point guard in the Big Ten, and he's very, very good. But I think going against this Houston defense will be a whole nother world. And Houston's got the best defense in the country in my eyes, and the metrics support that. And everyone talks about Houston's offense, and I agree with Byron, it could be a bludgeoning. Houston's offense is still 10th in efficiency rating. So it's not like it's 40th, but Purdue's defense is 55th, and that's the issue. So Braden Smith created a lot of offense in the last game, and especially late shot clock, but you're going against McNeese State and things like that. This is going to be a different ask. I like the first half. I think Houston just, bludgeoning's the right word. I think Houston takes care of business in the first half in the game. Probably my favorite play is really just Purdue's team total under 62.5. I don't see the Boilermakers getting much offense at all. I do think Houston's going to score some points against this weak defense. Kelvin Sampson's a very good coach. He's going to know what offensive sets to run. I think this is a mismatch, not by program name, but by the actual players on the court. Unless Purdue's two big, hosses like take off and carry this team, I don't think there's going to be much offense out of the Boilermakers.
Yeah, mate SK says Houston to win. You can't trust Purdue to cover. Houston in a bludgeoning. My ears are pricking up here, Doug. I'm playing around with the point spread on Bet Rivers here. I mean, -8 is the match total. What about something like -12 at +170? Could this be the blowout of the big favorites? You said you fancied the most of the big favorites.
Yeah. I mean, look, we might get some other blowouts. Don't get me wrong, but this is the Friday night game. I think, sometimes you have to think about how these games unfold, right? So later in the day, especially early in the tournament, sometimes teams play tighter that are favored, and they play not to lose and things like that. I don't think that strikes me with this Houston team. I think this Houston team's got a chance to win it all. Whereas I'm not sure I said that about other Houston teams in the past. I just didn't think they had the offense. I think the Cougars are going to be ready to rock. And I don't think being the last game of the Sweet 16, the late night Friday, is going to be sort of weighing on them and pressure is going to get to them. I think they're going to be just fine and comfortable in this situation.
Yeah, and under 28.5 first half points, Byron suggesting on...
Pretty close, but I like that.
Yeah, the first half spread on Houston, by the way, is -4.5 for those who like that. Just on -275 to win on the money line. Three-way spread first half as well. So very interesting thoughts there. And they are well backed, as like I said, at the top there. So we we're going to talk a bit NBA now, Doug, but just before that, I mean, what is the best bet for you this week 16? Would it be that one?
I'm just trying. Yes, it's that game. I'm just trying to think. I'm going to go team total on Purdue under 64.5. I'm just trying to think. If I like that, why don't I just like Houston to score points?
There's a lot of
You know what?
potential in
Yeah,
this
let's
game.
do Houston minus the 8. I think that's my favorite
Houston
play. I think they roll them.
Very good. Right, so we've got 3 NBA matches we're going to talk about today as well, and one also on the next day. Let's start here. Lakers at the Pacers. Really tight spread, -1.5. 235 point spread. Anything in this one, Doug?
So the market is moving in the Lakers' direction, which makes sense. They've lost 3 straight, and there's some desperation presumed for them. But I'm not buying it. Like, there was some desperation in their last game. They lost in Orlando. This Pacers squad has a lot of firepower, 5 straight wins, and I'm not convinced the Lakers defense is that elite like it has played over the last couple months up until the last couple games. I would just be very careful chasing the Lakers here. Frankly, I think the Pacers get the win, but I respect the market move that I'm laying off. But just be careful. Be careful assuming the Lakers are going to jump, got to get the win. Got to get the win. Like, do they? I mean, they're in the playoffs. They've been playing well. And LeBron's just coming back. He didn't look that good in the last game, so he's just getting back into form. Let's be careful. Assuming the desperate team is going to get the win here. I don't know if it's the best matchup because Pacers offense can score at will. Yeah,
very wise words there. This next matchup here, LA Clippers at New York Knicks. Interestingly, just looking at the percentages of the money here, I'll get it in a minute, but we've got a -3 on the Clippers, Doug. Have you got a bet for this game?
Yeah, I like the Clippers -3. It was 2 overnight. I agree with the steam. Knicks played last night, cruised to victory in the second half, but they are shorthanded here. Jalen Brunson, their best player, is obviously out, but McBride's out as well. Their big man Mitchell Robinson did not play as well yesterday. They have a thin second unit. That second unit is really weak, whereas the Clippers defense, and they have some nice pieces that have come back to health, Norman Powell specifically. Clippers have had won 5 straight, and they just lost by 2 to Oklahoma City. That's a moral victory, frankly. So they've been playing. They're in really good form. I think they'll be ready for this game. And you talk about a desperate team. Like, they're the 7th seed right now, and that's in the play-in tournament. They're a half game back of the 6th seed, which we had not in the plan. So they're certainly motivated, and I don't trust this team long-term because I don't trust the James Harden in the playoffs. But this isn't a playoff game, and I think Kawhi Leonard's in the best form he's been in all season. This is a spot I think you want to back the Clippers. They can beat you a lot of ways, and I think they're just a really good team. And you got Van Gundy back at the Garden. He's one of the assistants for the Clippers. I think this should be a fun game, but I like the Clip joint here.
-3 on the Clippers, and I can tell you 91% of the money is on the Clippers money line, -143. Celtics at Suns next up, -4 spread on the Celtics. You can get -162 on the money line here, 220.5 points spread. What's the interest in this game for you, Doug?
Yeah, I like Boston, man. I've been riding them in this road trip. They've on a roll, 6 straight wins. They're 11-1 in their last 12 games. Now, there was a midseason lull, which was to be expected coming off the championship, but I think they're kind of peaking at the right time. They've reached another gear. Now, Tatum's a little banged up, may not play, but I also think there's a little bit too much shine on this Phoenix Suns team. Phoenix has been one of the more disappointing teams in the entire NBA, underperforming. They're in the play-in where they came in with high aspirations, and they've won 4 straight. And everyone's talking like, okay, they may have flipped the switch. I'm not convinced. I think some of that was opponent-based, although I think their best game of the year was against Cleveland last Friday when they went wire to wire with the win. I like Boston here. I think the Suns defense stinks, and they don't defend at all. And I think Boston is going to have an open gym shooting from 3-point range. and they hit their shots. They've been playing well. One thing I'll say about the Phoenix Suns, they're one of the worst teams in the entire NBA against the spread. They were the single worst until the last couple games. But they are the reason they've been a disappointment this year is because they're unprofessional, they're unmotivated, they're lollygagging a lot, they're apathetic, and they are the worst team off a win. Get this, Steve, 9-24-1 against the spread off a win. So they just sort of relax once they win. Off a loss, they're actually pretty good. They're above 500. But off a win, they lollygag. Now, again, this recent stretch, they've won 4 straight, playing better, although they didn't cover the last game. But, they were laying 3, 1 by 2, whatever. I think the Celtics, there's just more ways for them to win and cover here than not. I think they're going to have open shots from 3, and if they don't hit them, they don't hit them. And that's just gambling. But I don't think the Suns are all of a sudden this strong defensive unit and great leadership. And I think they're kind of a mess. I don't believe in Gillespie, who they've been starting at point guard. Too many moving parts for this Phoenix team. I give them credit. They have a good coach who's, traded some guys midseason, tweaked his lineup a little bit. His starting lineup may have found the right recipe, but I'll go with the defending champs and hit some 3.
I like the sound of this defense, and the general manager of the Suns might need to look at the roster because that attitude stinks to me.
Yes,
when they win,
agree.
it gets to their head, but they respond when they lose. That's the sort of team that plays when they want to play. I hate that from teams. They sound like the Manchester United of the NBA, says Duncan Evans. That's probably about right. There is a match that you're going to talk about the next day. Rockets at Jazz. Doug, we haven't got any odds for this match yet, but there could be an interesting angle in it.
Yeah, it's a game I want to talk about for tomorrow, and I just texted an odds maker. He's expecting Houston to be favored by 12.5 at Utah tomorrow. And every sport's different, but there are narratives in betting, and you have to think outside the box. And Utah yesterday just lost by 1 million at home. I mean, there's some video going around of a guy, wide open shooter, short corner 3. He shoots a moon ball, and it doesn't even come close. I think the ball slipped in his hand, but their coach, Will Hardy, really had some strong words to his team about the professionalism it takes in the NBA, and the moment you sort of take things for granted, and I'm paraphrasing, but the moment you take things for granted, the moment you're gone out of the league. And it's a young team. They're tanking a little bit, things like that. I have a feeling that they are going to really respond well, at least to start the game. The Jazz have been a horrendous fourth quarter team, but they've been frisky in the first quarter and first half. And they're facing a Houston team that's off a win, and get this schedule. So they go Tuesday, they just played and had a nice win. Thursday at Utah, and then Sunday at Phoenix. So they play one opponent between Tuesday and Sunday, and it's one of the worst teams in the league, and you can kind of just roll the ball out and win easily. I think Houston comes in a little fat and happy, and they don't play great defense now that Fred VanVleet's in the lineup. I would play the Jazz, and we talked about it earlier, 1st to 10, 1st to 20, play around with some stuff, some alt line on the 3-way line. I think the Jazz had the lead after the first quarter. So maybe, if a 12.5 is the game line, you're looking at 3.5 as the first quarter line. So maybe look to play plus 3.5. I think you're going to get a good showing. Anytime teams get waxed and embarrassed, they usually play well. That you don't get to the NBA by just being a punching bag your whole life. So I think the coach set the tone, sent the message. Now the Rockets do play hard. They have a very intense coach themselves, but I think this is a good spot tomorrow to be back in Utah here early in the game.
Yeah, potential flat spot for a big favorite here.
Right.
Fascinating stuff. And Doug, I bow down to your brilliant knowledge here throughout the whole show. It's been really good. What a great breakdown of all the games that we've done. Thank you so much to everyone in chat who has put some. Ranjiv Singh, he's been putting in his NBA bets each day. I mentioned it. I think there was a tweet that was put out yesterday. But the chat and the comments that we have are brilliant. I mean, that Israel-Norway game yesterday, 3 or 4 winners from chat here. It's a great community. There's some really good stuff putting in there, and it's well worth following. Shakespeare is back. in the baseball.
Who knew William Shakespeare was such a gambler?
Shakespeare is a renowned baseball bettor. He likes the Washington Nationals on the money line, all 3 games against the Phillies in the opening series. You got to take note of this guy. He has a fantastic track record in the comments. So welcome back, Shakespeare. Hope you're doing really well. Basti Costa says maybe Doug should grow a full beard. If he keeps winning, he's going to be,
No complaints. Yeah.
We're doing that. But yeah, Doug, thanks so much. And you are back on Betting Weekly Live, I do believe, on Monday. I think.
Okay.
I think I'm me and you on Monday as well. So we look forward to that. And very best of luck with all your plays. Thanks so much for the breakdowns. Remember everyone to gamble responsibly. I'm done for the week on Betting Weekly Live. Now you've got Dan Roebuck for the next 2 days. And he's going to be joined by our senior ATP tour handicapper, Sean Calvert, tomorrow for the events in Miami. That tournament is really heating up now in the tennis. But Doug, thanks again so much. And we look forward to seeing you next time on Betting Weekly Live. Take care.
My pleasure. Thank you.